YouTube, it's Kel. I am back with another video, and tonight is going to be a follow-up on the other one that I did. I can't remember if it was last night or the night before, on codependency. And I didn't really get to go into the treatment of codependency as much as I would like. So I thought I would follow up on it to give you more of a step-by-step kind of things that you can do practically if you do struggle with codependency to try to heal, because people who struggle with codependency need to heal as much as, you know, the people that suffer from addiction or anger issues. We all have our stuff, right? So it's all about learning to fix our own issues. So I did make some notes for myself on just steps. There could be more in the future that I haven't thought of. There probably will be. And if so, I'll just, add them along the way in future podcasts. But I did make a decent amount for tonight, a good head start. And again, if you feel like you need more, there's definitely a lot of resources on the internet. So feel free to just Google or whatever. But one of the first things that I recommend to codependence, once you kind of acknowledge that you probably struggle with it, is getting in touch with your own feelings. Now, this might just seem so basic to some people, but the truth is that codependence, and again, this kind of stems back to childhood, got so good typically at scanning the room and knowing everybody else's feelings that they basically could read everybody else's feelings, but they felt like they never maybe had the luxury of sitting and dealing with their own feelings or analyzing themselves. So again, it's where the focus of attention is, right? Codependence, a lot of times the focus of attention is out here kind of on everybody else instead of knowing themselves and knowing their own feelings and self-care and things like that. So, and again, I'm not saying this to judge. Usually it is with the kindest, best intentions, but it can cause problems in people's lives when boundaries are confused, or you give in order to create your own happiness, but then don't get back, So the first one is, get in touch with your own feelings more, learn to, learn to say like, when are you feeling sad, or when are you feeling anxious, or when are you tired, when are you irritable, gain a feelings vocabulary, which I'm going to do another video on at some point, is a feelings vocabulary, because a lot of people, just think, I don't know, there's like sad, happy, and mad, so, and I'm not meaning to be condescending, but the more you get in touch with yourself, the more you can clarify what's going on with you, the better your relationships are going to be with other people, because you can communicate exactly what's going on with you better to other people. So get to know your feelings more. And this requires, obviously, and I should have said this in the beginning, the treatment of codependency essentially is focusing on yourself more, And so because you can't control other people. Now, this seems obvious, I know. But when you grew up in a household with what I would call enmeshed boundaries, and at some point I'll probably do a video on what are enmeshed boundaries, but it's basically like, if you have one sense of self in a person and then you have another person, and it should kind of be like this, where you have your unique sense of self, but you come together, Enmeshed boundaries are like this, where somehow the message got translated to people that I can control you and you can control me, and I can affect your emotions and you can affect mine, and if you do the right thing, maybe I'll be happier. It's just all very messy and chaotic, and everybody's reacting to each other. And so that's called enmeshed boundaries. And again, I'll probably do a video on that at some point. And that's my cat. If you can hear my cat, she's outside, but outside the door, like in the hallway. But I would say the first step is, again, focusing. The whole thing is focusing back on yourself, really. But there's just a lot of steps that you can do in order to do that. And again, it's about kind of empowerment, because when you focus on other people and you focus on things that are out of your control, you, believe it or not, you feel more and more powerless, because you don't have control over other people, right? So you do it to be a caretaker, to get a sense of like meaning and purpose, and that's maybe your identity, but it can leave you feeling powerless because over your own happiness, because you don't have control over other people, right? So, and that's what, codependency at its worst is about controlling other people, and resentment. And, when it's taken to its extreme, it can lead to that. So, again, pulling back and focusing on yourself and learning what makes you happy. And the first step, again, is getting in touch with your own feelings more so that ultimately you'll be able to express them, which leads to number 2, which is learning how to communicate your feelings properly. You probably, a lot of codependents grew up in a household. And again, I don't mean to psychoanalyze childhoods, but you kind of have to, just because you're like, where did I get this? A lot of times people grew up in households where they didn't express their feelings directly, adequately, effectively. A lot of times it was never said, I'm feeling sad today, or I'm feeling stressed out today, or I'm feeling anxious today, so instead it was just all these controlling behaviors going on. Everybody had to read the room, read everybody's behavior. Sometimes, there was just explosions of anger or whatever, or just withdrawal, or, and everybody had to kind of like perceive what's going on, and no one really expressed. And so in adulthood, codependents have to, in recovery, codependents have to learn how to communicate their feelings. They have to be able to say, hey, when you did that, it hurt me, or I felt sad, or, hey, I'm feeling a little depressed today, or, whatever it is. So, learning how to communicate your feelings effectively, directly, not passive aggressively, because a lot of times, codependents accidentally can be passive aggressive. So that's a whole different video. But again, directly, effectively, and knowing yourself well enough to identify the feeling word well is important to codependent recovery. Another one, the next step is self-care. So codependents are so used to being the quote caretaker for everybody else. And again, they have great hearts most of the time. But they have to learn to give to themselves what they are giving to other people. And because a lot of times codependents are giving to other people with this idea that, like, of course it's gonna come back to me, right? And I do believe in karma, like what you put out there does come back to you, but you cannot, when it comes to care, self-care, you cannot give to others to the point that it causes like resentment or some kind of like impairment in your life. Like I know codependent, when I worked in addiction treatment centers, I would see, for instance, parents of addicts who had like mortgaged their house or went into crazy debt trying to provide for their children who were suffering from addiction, and so like that's a very good example of obviously a lack of self-care, a lack of providing for their own, their own life. And so they're not modeling great boundaries, they're not modeling self-care. And again, like an addict will not recover without proper self-care. The answer kind of for a lot of people and a lot of things is us properly taking care of ourselves and making ourselves happy and then giving to others out of the overflow of that, so, and I am all for giving to others. I am not advocating for selfishness, but for selflessness, you have to have a self to give, and when you are extreme codependent, you don't even know who you are really. You're kind of just like, I'm just giving because I have to, and that's who I am. And I'm just like you can end up having a little bit of a martyr mentality. And again, you don't know your feelings. And, when people ask you, you're like, I don't know, so self-care is another great step. When I say that, I mean nurturing, I mean boundaries, which we're going to get into. So the next step is boundaries. Learning about and implementing emotional boundaries. If other people if and especially if other people are not treating you well. But also in things like work, if someone's asking you to work 60 hours a week, or anything that is jeopardizing your sense of well-being or happiness, learning to say that is not okay with me. I deserve whatever it is, something better, and I will have that, So believing in your sense of self that you do not deserve to be disrespected. You do not deserve. So it's really about, and then if someone is that way, you will learn to do whatever you need to, again, situation by situation, to take care of yourself. And that is the essence. It's like when you just like learn to kind of put a protective bubble around yourself, knowing you are the only way that you can make yourself happy, then you teach other people how to treat you, but if you don't do that, a lot of times it can be taken advantage of, and that line can be blurred. And I mean, again, I am all for forgiving people. We are all imperfect. I am not saying don't forgive people. But a chronic pattern of disrespect by others, a lot of times codependents can just be like, oh, with the empathy, they can understand it so much that they just continue to put up with it at their own detriment. And so anyways, I would say learning about boundaries and implementing them. That's another step. Another step is what I call using your voice. So when you don't like something, when a need is not being met, speaking up, not just kind of letting it go and then being resentful about it later, because that can happen to you. You're so used to, maybe you grew up in a house where your voice didn't matter, or you were afraid that like if you said something, it was going to get into a big argument. But learning that like your voice does matter and you saying what you need does matter. And if the people around you are not respecting that, then that is a problem. So that's another step. Another intervention is to recognize fears that you might have around healthy, intimate relationships, because a lot of times codependents can, they do caretaking behaviors as a way of either earning the relationship or feeling like this is my identity and I don't know who I am in this relationship if I am not in a caretaking position. Also, another thing is deep down with codependence, they can have a fear of admitting things like sadness or defects in themselves. And so therefore they want to go fix everybody else, And so instead of getting in touch with their own sadness and their own, whatever their own quote problems are, because we all have them, they will just kind of go fix other people or try to fix. You can't fix another person, but they will go try to, because it gets their mind off of their own problems and it gets their heart off their own problems. And again, can result in psychic numbing. It's distraction. So really and then in intimacy, you can be afraid to tell your real feelings because you're afraid to say things like that hurt me, or I'm sad, or, admitting needs can be very hard for codependents. So again, these are things that you want to work on. And the next step that I was going to say is you want to work on in therapy. And so that's another intervention, is going to therapy, because in individual therapy or mental health therapy, the therapist focuses on you and you get to focus on yourself. It is a period of time that's uninterrupted where if you have a good therapist, it's all about you focusing on yourself. The focus should not be on the therapist, obviously. But it should be about you getting uninterrupted time to focus on yourself, which you probably do not have in many cases in your life. A lot of times with friends or loved ones, it's kind of like, quote, an equal give and take, and you kind of dialogue back and forth. But in therapy, you get uninterrupted time to focus on yourself, your own patterns, your own feelings for an hour, longer if you want. But so, and then you do that. If you do that consistently enough, you really get to know yourself and how you feel, and, you're insightful about yourself. And so it's for codependents who are so used to, quote, focusing on everybody else and being like hyper vigilant about everybody else. therapy is amazing because it gets you to verbalize your feelings. It gets you to focus on yourself, you know, so it's kind of the opposite. It's exactly what you need, you know. And then the last one that I have is Codependence Anonymous meetings, which I have a girlfriend who went to Codependence Anonymous meetings religiously and just constantly would talk to me about how helpful they are. And I believe it because codependents are kind of like a breed unlike a lot of other people, and you learn how to not caretake other people. I mean, again, you can care for other people and you can do giving, loving behaviors. I am not advocating for not taking care of other people. But when you are doing it for your own happiness and your own happiness is dependent on that, is a problem. When you do not know how to make yourself happy and you compulsively are looking to someone else to do that, that is a big sign that you are being codependent. So Codependence Anonymous meetings are amazing because everyone there has struggled with that issue to a point that usually is like somewhat detrimental in their life, and they're willing to talk about it and you feel not alone. It's a supportive community, just like it's a 12-step program. It's very, very helpful for people. So that is, I believe it's coda.org. I linked it in the video that I did the other day. I'll probably link it in the video again today. But those are just some basics as to like the essence of treatment for codependency. And if you struggle with this, again, there's zero judgment. This is something that develops kind of quote naturally in a system, a family system. And again, every single one of us has something that we struggle with. And like I said, codependents a lot of times have the most giving, loving hearts. It just can get them in trouble, you know? And I'm not advocating for not having empathy for other people. I am all for empathy. If anyone who knows me knows I'm like empathetic to a fault. I'm getting better about that. But I just have seen, working in addiction treatment centers for 5 years, you just end up seeing how everyone kind of has their own things that impair their own well-being and happiness in their lives. And codependents are no different. And so I wish you progress in your own journey if you are a codependent. I hope these steps helped, and I am thinking about you tonight, and I am sending you love, and I will be back another time soon. Okay, have a good night.